Welcome to It's a Grand Life, where our mission is to be a voice for grand families and kinship caregivers everywhere. Did you know that in the United States alone, there are 2.3 million grandparents raising their grandchildren? 2.3 million. It's a Grand Life is committed to making a difference for those kids. That's why we have the podcast, a Facebook group, and the Grand Fund. The Grand Fund, which is a 501c3 which was launched in June of 2024, provides financial assistance to grand families, including shelter, food, clothing, and household needs. Grand families are in every neighborhood, in every city, every tribe, and territory nationwide. If this is you or someone you love, we're here for you, and we welcome you to join us on this mission. Our goal is to offer hope and resources to help you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. You can also join our Facebook group. Just search for it under It's a Grand Life. And your reviews, comments, and sharing of our podcasts help us reach others that need assistance. Welcome to another episode of It's a Grand Life. Hello, my name is Craig Nash. We'd like to welcome you to another It's a Grand Life. And today you are absolutely going to be blessed. We have a phenomenal coach in the house with us today. Not only a basketball coach, but a life coach. And for all the grandparents and grandkids who are listening out there across the country, I think you're going to really be encouraged. And that's as Kirt Pleasant, Dr. Kirt Pleasant is our guest today. And he's just got an incredible background and has spoken all over the country, encouraging folks with his testimony. And Clint, thanks so much for joining us here on It's a Grand Life. And we're just delighted to have you. I'm just so thankful that we have our mutual friend and our Dominic Morelli, who's with FaithWorks, and FaithWorks, of course, is a partner with It's a Grand Life. We work with them on they put a ramp up in someone's house, and we'll come behind them and help them with some of the other things that the families may need. But you also volunteer with FaithWorks, so it's such a small world, isn't it?
It sure is. And thanks for having me, Craig. I want to meet that guy that you introduced a minute ago. I appreciate that introduction, and really, it's a blessing to be a guest on your podcast.
Well, we appreciate you coming on today, and I know you've got a million things you could be doing, but I just get the feeling that encouraging others and sharing your story and trying to, especially folks like grandparents who have been through some tough situations with family members and what have you, and they're now raising their grandkids, but you're all about dealing with those types of difficult situations. And why don't you share a little bit of your story with our audience and how you've handled some of the ups and downs in your life?
I'd be happy to, and I would start at the top of the your show here just to say I'm feeling a bit insecure, and because I'm not a grandparent at the moment, and so I do want to show deference to all of your guests that you've had who speak out of that experience of being a grandparent, and I'm not at that place yet. Hopefully one day I will be. I have two daughters who are the love of my life, and if they bless Rachel and I with grandchildren someday, then maybe you can have me back on the show. Yeah, life's been good. I just recently turned 50, so definitely feeling sort of that turning of the page from middle age, and grew up in Rochester, had great relationships with my mom and my dad, Garth and Pat Pleasant, and my grandparents, Lucian and Ida Palmer, who lived in Nashville, Tennessee, and then my grandparents on my dad's side, John and Ina Pleasant, who lived in Flint. And I can say that I had close relationships to all four of them. We did lose my dad's dad when I was younger, when I was 15, but I have fond memories, great memories with him, and he was an incredible man. I am a coach by trade. I've coached at several different colleges and universities, and also have worked in college administration as well. And then in 2016, went back to pursue my doctorate. Again, my wife is Rachel. We've been married since 2000, so over 25 years now. We have two daughters, Abigail, who is a junior in college at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California, and she's studying pre-law. And then my youngest daughter, Julia, who's named after my grandmother, her great grandmother.
All right.
Craig, who's still living at 103 years old. And
Oh,
I just went and wished her happy birthday at the facility she's living at on November the 7th, my grandmother. Again, still living at 103. So Julia's named after her. She's a sophomore at Rochester High, and she's thriving. We ran into a little bit of a crisis, my wife and I, in the year 2005. My wife was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, and they didn't think that she would survive. And so we did all the gut wrenching things, like having her say goodbye to, at that time, Abby was just 6 months old.
oh,
In very, very difficult times. She survived a few different brain surgeries. She now lives with some disabilities, and I'm very much a caretaker. But I start that way. You asked kind of briefly for my bio and my story. I don't know. Well, we wouldn't have survived. We would not have survived that trauma without the grandparents. We just wouldn't have. And when I say grandparents, I'm speaking of my parents and Rachel's parents, my children's grandparents. They surrounded us, they cared for us, and they helped get us through. So that's a little bit about my story, and I'm looking forward to kind of launching into your questions.
well, that is absolutely so interesting that your parents and your wife's parents jumped in to help you guys, as all of our listeners are doing. They they helped raise your daughters, right, in a very difficult time for you guys.
Absolutely.
So 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 you had on your resume you talk about going through some personal trauma and unexpected tragedies, and how that has been an inspiration to others. How has your story inspired others, and how could that inspire grandparents today who are feeling a little overwhelmed? They've got a situation that's totally changed for them. In fact, Clint, in America, there's 2.3 million grandparents that are involved in grand families. They're raising their grandkids. About 80% of them are not living at the level of financial prosperity that they thought they would be when they're retired. 20% are at or below the poverty line. The next 60%, they make more money than they to qualify for any assistance, but they're still struggling month to month. So they're not, challenges and traumas. That's just a day-to-day occurrence for a lot of the grandparents across this country. How did you relate to your personal challenges, especially the health challenges with your wife, and have you used that to be an inspiration to others?
Well, I appreciate that question, and I don't want to be too preachy, but this is a question I'm pretty passionate about. So, you never expect to go through something like that. You sort of think that story is reserved for the movies, what you see in the movies, or what your neighbor has to deal with. When we got the news that my wife had a brain tumor, and our world in an instant, and Craig, in a snap of a finger, just changed. Well, the first thing I did was I called my parents. I didn't feel like I was equipped to go through that alone. And so, at the risk of sounding a little bit superficial, um, what you find out when you go through crisis or traumas, you find out that all the things that we read about, all the things that we hear about, are actually true. You leaning in on family, you leaning in on the people that you can count on and that love you, and hopefully, you can go through life and not have to navigate anything hard. But when you do, if you do, those support systems that we have really do work. And I have even right now, I can kind of feel the emotion, just memories of my parents coming over. We're going to be here for as long as you need, for whatever you need. When this happened to my wife, I had Craig. Our daughter was six months old. My wife had all sorts of MRIs that she had to do, and they had to put dye in her system, so she was no longer allowed to breastfeed. And she was also bedridden, getting ready to have brain surgery. So all of a sudden, I'm having to figure out overnight, how do I get our baby nourishment? Because in an instant, one day Rachel was breastfeeding, the next day there's a crisis, she's not breastfeeding. How do I get the baby nourishment? So what do you do in those situations? you call mom and dad.
Right.
And even though I was 30 years old and already an adult, I think sometimes, Craig, we tend to get enamored, or we like bracket life categories based on age, and that's just not true.
No.
Especially now, as we see people getting married older and having children older, even though they might already be well into their 30s, they need help and support. And so one of the things I just really want to underscore in this podcast is that, um, it really, and Jordan Peterson says this, it really takes two generations to raise kids. Um, am I equipped to be a father? Of course I am. But as we say, there's no owner's manual that come with the children. And
Right.
so what you do is you lean on people that have experience. You lean on the grandparents. And so in some ways, I think grandparents parent differently, but in some ways, they're absolutely still involved in their parenting, and they're not only parenting their children, I think they're helping their children learn how to parent. And so, if you think about it, it really kind of is a beautiful system. Now, you referenced some stats earlier. Oftentimes, grandparents get thrust into a situation that maybe causes them to be a little more hands-on. Um, but in our situation, we just simply would not have made it if it hadn't have been for the grandparents being willing to re-engage, come alongside, offer support, and some of my just when I count my blessings and think about my blessings, at the very top of that list is that when I was well into my 30s and I still needed a mom and dad, I had them.
And I think many of our listeners can absolutely relate to your story. They're the ones who've jumped in like your parents did. And I just love the fact that they said, we're here as long as you need us. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And what that does to a young dad at 30 and with a 6 month old, Lord have mercy, the comfort that they provided to you in the midst of an absolute crisis. Was absolutely huge. And were there hiccups? I'm sure there were hiccups with your kids and in the middle of that. But just knowing that, did you? And you said both sets of grandparents jumped in to help.
Yes, I mean, since we're local, my parents were a little more accessible because they're local. My wife's parents are from St. Louis, so it was a little harder. But especially my mother-in-law, I mean, she would drop whatever she was doing and she would fly to Detroit, and she would just jump in. And whether it was caring for, I mean, there were times when you're watching her care for her daughter and then
Right.
care for her daughter's daughter.
Right.
And all this is happening, in the same 5 minutes, and it's really sobering to see. And just I think as I get older, and now especially as my oldest kid is almost 21 and has a boyfriend and thinking about that next step, I'm no less her parent. And I tell her that all the time. I say, Abby, I know she studied abroad last semester, so she lived in Europe and she traveled around, and she kept reminding me, Craig, that she was an adult and that she had it all under control. And
Yes.
I said, Abby, you need to understand something right now. As long as I'm alive, I'm never going to stop loving you.
Right.
I'm never going to stop having concern for you, and I will never stop being your parent. I'll tell you one more thing, and then I'll stop. I said I have a grandmother who's 103, and she's still alive, and as best as she can, she's still caring for her daughter, my mom, who's 76. And when they're together, and my mom will sneeze or cough or have the sniffles, her mom at 103 is saying, Pat, can I get you something? Are you okay, Pat? It's just beautiful to see.
Absolutely beautiful to hear about, and it's the beautiful support of the family and what have you. But you also had another life going on at the same time. You were in the middle of your career, and you're putting this Hall of Fame basketball career together. What was that like? And on basketball teams don't play at the same arena every night. I don't know if you knew that, but you may have away games or something that
Yeah.
might interfere with some kids' schedules. And how did you juggle all those balls?
Well, you call your parents, you ask the grandparents to help. And really, really, I mean, I know this is sort of the theme of your show, but when I remember a time when during the season when I remember looking at my dad and said, Dad, I can't do this. I can't do this for one more day. I mean, I don't know how to be a caretaker and a husband and a father and an administrator and a coach. And, I was ministering at the time, I was preaching, and also the lawn needs mowed. You have to cook dinner. I mean, you know all this, Craig. And so I remember kind of falling apart in my dad's arms, and my dad said, you just you don't know what you're capable of. We're going to find a way, and let's just focus on getting through this week. And one thing is that my parents, I think it's great when you've got to strike that balance, right? Because you could have grandparents who are a little too pushy and they're trying to insert themselves, and obviously sometimes families need their privacy. But for our situation, my parents just said, you just let us know when we'll be there. And so, we never had to, we never felt like we were putting them out. Basically, they just chose to re-engage with the hard stuff. When I say hard stuff, I mean babysitting, running around and getting meals, not just the easy stuff or the fun stuff that grandparents get to do, and that is like, go to the beach and swing with them or build a sandcastle, and then they get to go home. I mean, my parents, they dug back in, and just knowing that they were willing and available to do that. Again, I don't know how we would have made it through without the grandparents re-engaging and willing to continue to parent as we're talking about here on the show.
You talked a lot about, or you mentioned your faith in the middle of this and how you were in the midst of these challenges, you were still preaching. And in addition to the basketball, in addition to the administrative work and other things you were doing, plus cutting the lawn, which we all have to do. How did you balance all that, and how important is your faith to you?
I mean, it's everything. I've often said that I don't want my identity to be that I'm a basketball coach or that I'm this or that or fill in the blank. I want my identity to be that I'm a child of God, and that I'm trying my best to follow the ways of Jesus. Period. End of discussion. And I've tried to make that clear to my children that at the end of the day, there's nothing more important to me than my relationship with my Savior, and I've done my best to pass that on to my children. But what's really neat is when you see that being passed down from generation to generation. I mean, I saw that in my parents, and now I'm trying to model it to my kids, and so now my kids can kind of look up, and in their case, they can see three generations because they still have a great grandmother alive, as I've said a few times on the call.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so they can look up and they can say, okay, mom and dad are sort of doing this. Um, they call my mom and dad Coach and Peach. Coach and Peach are doing this. Nana, their great grandmother, my grandmother, Nana. And so they sort of can see that pattern, and they see all of us sort of walk in the same path. And I think it's really neat when they can see that, because they could say, okay, maybe one of them is wrong, but they're all six not wrong.
Exactly.
And so I think it's neat when you see that faith passed down to generation. But it kept me going. In fact, today I still have a basket. And in that basket is cards that poured in from elders and friends and church people and all the people that cared for us when Rachel was so sick. And the church does what the church does when someone's in crisis. They show up. They bring the casserole. I mean, there was a lady from church that came over and would massage Rachel's feet with sweet smelling oils. And do you need food? What do you need? Do you need this? Do you need that? And so it's not just grandparents, it's the community, it's the church, it's the whole village, as we say. So, but yeah, you asked about faith. I mean, I don't know how someone navigates a real crisis and trauma without having a centering point of faith. I know some do. I just don't know how they do it.
But there were some times, I'm sure, where you said, like you mentioned earlier, I can't do this another day, Dad. And this is just, and that's, Clint, I think that's something that our grandparents wrestle with often. That we're, when you're counting the years till the nest is empty again, if it was ever empty. And how did you handle that when when it's just absolutely overwhelming? And what did you do to kind of reset your attitude or your outlook? Because I imagine you had to do that many times in the midst of the
Absolutely.
struggle. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the main thing is I was willing to lean in on the support group, and maybe even before that, the fact that was maybe smart enough to know I needed a support group. I've often said that Simon and Garfunkel were wrong. No man is an island. We all need help and support, and I think just being willing to ask. You know, uh, the stereotypical kind of male, you don't want to ask, you want to do everything. But I just got to a place where I had to ask, and that's how I handled it. I handled it with my parents, with my friends, with my support group, with the church, with my coworkers, and it's sort of like the metaphor I use is when I was younger, I had this goal that I wanted to climb as many 14,000 plus peaks that I could in Colorado. And so I started kind of taking some of those off. And me and a couple buddies tackled Pikes Peak, which is 14,400 feet. And sort of the deal we made is we said, as we make this trip, as we make this journey, there's going to be a time where one of us is exhausted and can't go any longer. And when that happens, lean in on the person that has a little more energy at the moment. And then there'll be a time when we swap. When that person will be just exhausted, and then the other person will have a little bit left in the tank. And when that happens, then you lean in on me. And I think that's a good metaphor for life.
Right.
And so I think that's how I approached it. And there have been days, Craig, where I've been angry. I've been upset at God. I've felt like, why is this happening to me? And so what I've had to do is and this is important for me to say, I've had to make sure that I don't ever associate or index God's love of me based on my current situation. If I did that, I probably would have abandoned my faith. And sometimes I have to remind myself, things didn't always go great for Moses. Things didn't always go great for Abraham. Things didn't always go great for King David. Things didn't always go great for Peter. Things didn't. I can keep going if you want. You see what I'm saying. And so
Yes.
I forced myself to not associate or index God's love for me based on my current situation.
The circumstance.
Yeah, and I think that really helped me.
So looking back now, you're 50 now, or you're turning 50, and this situation happened 20 years ago when things started, the world started to unravel for you guys. You had all these high hopes and everything was going to go smooth as silk. And when you look back on that, and what would you say is the number one lesson you learned in that whole situation?
Wow. Um, I think the number one lesson I learned is that uh, family and community. Um, we really weren't meant to do this alone. We were meant to do it with people. We were meant to do it in community. Um, and I think if I had to, there's so many ways I want to answer that question, but if I had to say just one thing, because that's what you asked me, I would say just the reminder that we don't we don't have to bear our burdens alone. And burdens are meant to be shared so they're not as heavy for any one person. And that's the biggest lesson I learned. I learned that um, the people that really love you are willing and even want to rush to help meet the burden. And I also want to say, I'm approaching some big life decisions even right now as we do this podcast. And the other day, in fact, yesterday, I was sort of uh, just fuzzy on some decisions I need to make, and so I called my dad. I mean, I'm 50 years old. My dad's 77, and I still want to know what he thinks. I still want him to know that I want to know what he thinks. I still want to tap into his wisdom. He's still got 27 years on me,
Yeah.
and I think the saying goes, life is the greatest teacher. Well, he's got 27 years of more of life teaching. And so, um, if there's anything that your listeners take away today, I hope it's that I'm living proof that um, you don't age out of parenting. You just don't.
Man, is that great. That is so true. You are absolutely speaking to our audience because we are not aging out of parenting.
No.
We're we get round two. And what a testimony to your dad that you can't wait to run your potential changes, life changes by him because he does have 77 years of wisdom. And so in our closing here, what final thoughts would you like to leave our audience? In addition to don't do this alone, and that we're all tempted to be, to isolate and not bother with other folks, but you are living proof. You need community when you're in the midst of these life-changing situations. Thank God your parents could jump in and be the grandparents above and beyond. And but what would you leave our audience with as we end our time today?
Yeah, I think an encouraging word would be as I just think about my two kids. My two kids, they know that I'm their dad, and I'm always going to be their dad. But my mom and my dad have intentionally made themselves available and done different things to show my kids that they are still here and willing to support and parent if there's anything they can do. And they do that by the form of daily check-ins. And oftentimes, Craig, I don't even know about these things. I learn about them from my kids, not my parents. And I'll find out from my daughter, did you know that Paige sent me a text yesterday? Or did you know that she sent me a care package? Or did you know that she called me just to, and so my point is that even though you're a grandparent and your kids are now the parents of their kids, stay engaged, make yourself available, pay attention, because as I look at my kids, it's been great that in some ways again, and it's not to minimize me and my wife. I mean, they know they have a mom and dad, but in some ways they look and go, I do have a mom and dad, but I also have this other unit or this other group, my grandparents on each side. And that hasn't intimidated me. It hasn't hurt my feelings. I think it's actually just enriched our family. And so my closing word is that if you are a grandparent, don't think that it's time to just sit on the rocker and watch the sunset and die soon. I mean, you have an opportunity to be curious, to pay attention, and to continue to breathe life in and give support to an up and coming generation. And you never know what might be said or how it might be said where you can have an impact. And again, not to minimize the parents, just to support the parents. And it's been, maybe my family's unique. I don't think it is, but I know that my two kids cherish the relationship they have with their grandparents. And it's done nothing except strengthen and increase what I'm trying to do as the parent.
Absolutely. I did just what a wonderful story, and just the extended family involvement is. I know our listeners can relate to that. Thanks so much for being our guest here on It's a Grand Life, and you've just encouraged all of us and just to stay connected and to continue to support the grands in whatever form that is. But Kirt Pleasant, thank you so much for being our guest here on It's a Grand Life, and I hope you'll keep us posted in case there's any changes down the road. But we just appreciate all your time today.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for all you do. You're making a difference, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today for It's a Grand Life. It's a Grand Life provides vital content, regulatory updates, and subject matter experts that are committed to supporting the 2.4 million kids and their caregivers from every neighborhood, every city, every tribe and territory nationwide. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review. Every new subscriber and review helps us reach others that need assistance. As caregivers, we are united in purpose. We are driven by hope while providing strength for today and hope for tomorrow. We are truly making a difference while living the grand life. If you have a suggestion for a future episode, please reach out to us. But we'll see you next time for another It's a Grand Life. Thank you for joining us.